Imagine being hailed as a hero in one moment, only to be revealed as a ruthless killer in the next. Jack Unterweger was a man who fooled the world with his charm, a man who used his past as a springboard to manipulate, deceive, and ultimately destroy. But beneath the facade of a reformed man lay the soul of a predator. This is the chilling story of Jack Unterweger, the journalist, the poet, and the murderer. Born in 1950 in Austria, Jack Unterweger's life was one of both tragedy and manipulation. His past was a mix of poverty, crime, and a tortured childhood. But his story isn't just about his early life. It's about how he used the very things that should have held him back to give him the mask of respectability. This mask would allow him to commit horrendous crimes, taking the lives of innocent women. Let's dive into the mind of this manipulative figure and uncover the victims he took and how he did it. Jack Unterweger's journey into darkness began in his youth. Raised by his grandmother after his mother abandoned him, Jack had a turbulent upbringing. By the time he was in his late teens, he had already been involved in petty crimes and violent behavior. At 18, Jack was convicted of his first major crime. He strangled a woman with her own bra, a gruesome act that would define his dark path. In 1974, the 23-year-old Jack Unterweger's crime spree began. He strangled a 19-year-old prostitute named Margarete Scherf in Vienna. Her body was found in a ditch, brutally murdered with the same method Jack would use repeatedly. This killing was only the beginning. But what was most chilling about Jack was that he appeared to be a model citizen on the surface. Arrested for the murder, Jack's seemingly remorseful behavior earned him sympathy. He would be sentenced to life in prison. But instead of being the end of his story, this would mark the beginning of a deadly reinvention. While in prison, Jack Unterweger became a poet, a writer, and a journalist. He had an uncanny ability to manipulate those around him, convincing people he had reformed. His writings gained popularity, and soon, he was celebrated as a success story, a symbol of rehabilitation. In fact, his fame would lead to an early release in 1990, only 16 years into his life sentence. Little did anyone know, this new Jack was a man already plotting his next move. Freed from prison, Jack Unterweger took to the streets, but instead of starting a new life, he began a killing spree. This time, he would use his status as a reformed man to get close to his victims. Jack didn't go after just anyone. His targets were prostitutes, much like the one he killed in his youth. Between 1990 and 1992, Unterweger murdered at least 11 women across several countries: Austria, Germany, and the United States. He stalked his victims in the same methodical manner each time. He would approach them with charm, often offering them a ride or paying for their services, just like any regular client. But the moment he got them alone, he would strangle them to death with their own bras or other intimate garments, using the same method as his first murder. It wasn't just the violence that made these crimes terrifying. It was the precision, the coldness with which he committed them. He was a predator who knew how to blend in, how to gain trust, only to betray it in the most horrific ways. Each of Jack Unterweger's victims had their own story, their own life, that was cut short far too soon. In 1990, he killed his first victim post-release, Michaela K., a 26-year-old prostitute. Then, in 1991, came the shocking murder of another woman, known only as the American. Her body was found in Los Angeles, but it wasn't until 1992 that the full scope of Jack's depravity would be realized. Authorities started to notice a pattern. Each victim was a woman working as a prostitute, each strangled with a bra. The method was too similar, the kills too close together for it to be a coincidence. Other victims include women like 21-year-old Clara M., 36-year-old Maria T., and many more. Each life ended in a brutal, cold-blooded way. At the time, Jack was being praised for his rehabilitation and artistic talents. No one suspected the monster lurking beneath his charming exterior. As the bodies stacked up, so did the pressure on the police to catch the killer. A task force was created, and soon, investigators realized the killer had been writing about his crimes. Jack Unterweger had written articles for magazines, and even a memoir, in which he claimed to be inspired by his own experience with prostitution. It wasn't long before the truth started to unravel. He had been to the crime scenes, sometimes under the guise of a journalist, and at other times, as the killer himself. The turning point came when investigators found a connection between Jack's writings and the locations of the murders. Jack had been using his journalistic assignments to not only gather material for his articles, but to scout his victims. Eventually, after his suspicious behavior and more reports linked him to the crimes, Jack was arrested in 1994. At trial, Jack Unterweger's defense was anything but remorseful. He tried to paint himself as the victim of a justice system that had failed him, but the evidence was undeniable. He was convicted of 11 murders. Though many believe he may have committed even more, Jack Unterweger was sentenced to life in prison once again. However, just a few years later in 1994, while awaiting further legal proceedings, he took his own life in his prison cell, hanging himself with a pair of his own shoelaces. Jack Unterweger's story is one of the most disturbing tales of manipulation, deception, and murder. He convinced the world that he had turned his life around, that he was no longer the monster he once was. But in the end, his true nature was exposed in the most horrifying way possible. His murders, carried out with chilling precision, left behind a trail of devastation and grief. And while his death ended his reign of terror, the lives of his victims remain a tragic reminder of how easily charm can mask the darkest of intentions. May we remember the women whose lives were taken, and never forget the monster who was able to hide in plain sight. Jack Unterweger will forever remain a cautionary tale of how evil can wear the most unsuspecting of faces.